Come on in. My name is Bill Tobin, and this is your Restaurant Success Tip of the Day. Another conversation that we're having in the restaurant right now is about auto gratuity. That's been a subject of conversation for my entire career in the restaurant industry. If you're not familiar with the auto gratuity, it's common practice, or was common practice in many restaurants for large parties of 6, 8, or 10. Usually most restaurants start at 6 or 8. Large parties will get an automatic gratuity added to their check. When I started in this industry, an auto gratuity was adding 15% onto a check so that the servers knew that they were getting a certain amount of tip for large parties, or a certain percentage on large parties. The reasoning for this was the idea was that large parties often under-tipped. And sure, if you get a big check with 8 people and you say, wow, that's a big tip for somebody, it's just a server who's coming, and people maybe think that 15% is too large of a tip. Or when people split checks, often somebody forgets to tip, or they say, well, this is what I had to eat, and they split the check for their entree and their drinks and their maybe part of an appetizer, but then they forget to add in the tip. So adding an auto gratuity is a convenience for the restaurant, or specifically the server, but it's also thought of as a convenience for the guest. Unfortunately, the IRS made a ruling back in 2014 or 2015 that said that auto gratuities are not considered tip income for staff. It's actually can be controlled by the restaurant, and it's wage income for staff. It made it an accounting nightmare for a lot of restaurants. So a lot of restaurant companies did away with auto gratuities. And now it seems like they are starting to come back into popularity, regardless of the IRS ruling and the accounting nightmare that supposedly they create. And so right now we're having that discussion in our restaurant, whether we should add auto gratuity onto large parties again, whether that be, we haven't even decided whether that's going to be parties of 6 or 8 or more. And my discussion with other managers and a few staff who are tipped employees would be that this is a fair way for us to ensure that our servers are getting tipped fairly, because I do know there are some times where large parties do tip less than 15%. And frankly, most auto gratuities now are 18%. But so we're thinking about adding it on, but we're also thinking about including hosts and kitchen people into our tip pool, so that those people can also benefit from the busyness of a restaurant. If you include your other staff, your hosts and kitchen, right now, if you have non-tipped hosts or non-tipped kitchen staff, they get paid the same whether the restaurant's busy or slow. So there's no incentive for them to bust their tail if the restaurant's busy. As a matter of fact, if a host says, we don't need any more parties, let's close, it's 8 o'clock at night and I've already worked hard, I don't feel like being special to our guests walking up, and I don't feel like squeezing in 1 or 2 more tables into the restaurant, and there's no incentive for them to do that. But if they are sharing in the tip, then they might get the mindset that more tables, more people is going to increase their tip pool and their tip income. And so our idea is that a rising tide raises all ships, and we're thinking we want to include hosts and kitchen people in our tip pool. And part of that is adding back the auto gratuity. It's a little bit of negotiating on what those little percentages are, but it seems like a fair way to manage it, especially because of COVID. We haven't been able to give our staff raises because we have no cash flow. We're just getting back to normal finally. We're at about 90% of what we were and 2019 numbers, and we're getting to a point where everybody's back on salary and everybody's back working, but giving people raises is still a little off in the future. But if we but we raised all of our menu prices, and the argument is that every time you raise a menu price, you're actually giving the servers a raise because they make their money based on their percentage of sales because people tip them. And the theoretically, if your menu prices go up, that means the sales go up, and that means the servers are making more tips. And so even though the servers have gotten raises because you've raised your menu prices, the kitchen and the hosts haven't gotten any raises. So we think it's fair to cut them into the tip pool. But we don't want to take 2 or 3% from the servers. We're trying to re-engineer it so everybody gives a little bit, but everybody works together to gain on it. And our idea of helping that and make it all happen is doing the auto gratuity. So we're looking at that now, and we're going to deal with the accounting nightmare on the back end of it, and I'll do another podcast about that at another time. So your task for today, consider an auto gratuity to help your back of the house and host staff in your tip pool. Now go make it happen. Do you have a comment or a tip for restaurant leaders? Text me at 808-201-0550 or find me at restaurantleadership365.com. This is Bill Tobin. Thanks for coming in. See you tomorrow.